The Vethari Dominion had ruled the stars. For 12,000 years, their empire stretched across 3,000 worlds, and their fleets numbered 9 million warships. In all that time, no species had ever defeated them. No civilization had ever refused their commands. The Vethari were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 eyes that could see in complete darkness. They believed they were the chosen rulers of the galaxy, and for 12,000 years nobody had proved them wrong. Emperor Thavarak sat on his throne made of metal taken from conquered worlds. He was old even by Vethari standards, and he had personally ordered the destruction of 17 space-faring civilizations. Some had begged for mercy, some had tried to fight, all of them had died. The emperor did not feel guilt about this. In his mind, weak species did not deserve to exist. The strong ruled and the weak served or perished. This was the natural law of the universe. On a quiet day in the imperial palace, military advisor approached the throne. The advisor's name was Consul Dravik, and he carried a data tablet in his 4-fingered hands. Great Emperor, Dravik said, bowing low, our deep space sensors have detected something interesting, radio signals from an unexplored system in the outer regions. The Emperor's 4 eyes focused on the advisor. Radio signals, how primitive. Yes, Great One, the species appears to be in early development. They have only recently left their planet's surface. Our analysis suggests they pose no threat whatsoever. Thalarak made a sound of displeasure. Then why do you waste my time with this? Because, Great Emperor, their world is rich in resources, heavy metals, rare elements, and vast oceans of water. It would make an excellent mining colony. The emperor considered this for a moment, then he waved his hand in a gesture that had meant death. For billions of beings across the galaxy, send the cleansing fleet, remove the natives, prepare the world for colonization. Consul Drevik bowed again. It shall be done, Great One. And with those simple words, the Vethari Dominion made the worst mistake in their 12,000-year history. Admiral Zarin commanded the cleansing fleet. She was young for an admiral, only 300 years old, but she had earned her position through ruthless efficiency. She had personally overseen the extinction of 2 species and the enslavement of 5 more. Her fleet consisted of 1,400 warships, each one capable of destroying a city in seconds. For this mission she had been given far more ships than necessary. The humans, as these primitive creatures called themselves, had no space navy. They had no defensive satellites. They had nothing but chemical rockets and a few fragile stations orbiting their world. Zarin could have conquered them with a single cruiser. The 1,400 ships were simply a matter of Vethari pride. The journey to the human system took 3 weeks through hyperspace. Admiral Zarin spent most of that time reading reports about the target species. She found them mildly interesting in a detached scientific way. The humans were soft creatures with only 2 eyes. They came in different colors and sizes. They had divided their single world into hundreds of competing nations that frequently fought each other. Their technology was primitive, but showed some promise. They had split the atom, which was impressive for such a young species. They had sent members of their kind to their nearest moon. They had built machines that could think, but they had no shields, no energy weapons, no faster than light. Travel against the Vithari Dominion. They might as well have been throwing rocks, a waste of resources, Zarin muttered to her second-in-command fleet. Captain Morvax, we could conquer this world with a ground team. Morvax nodded. In agreement. Perhaps the Emperor wishes to send a message, a show of overwhelming force. Perhaps Zarin closed the report. It matters little. We will be done within a day. The cleansing fleet emerged from hyperspace just beyond the orbit of the human's fourth planet. Zarin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Divine Wrath, and looked at the small blue world on her viewscreen. It was pretty, she admitted. Blue oceans, green and brown land, masses, white clouds swirling across its surface. It reminded her of Vthar Prime. In some ways, she felt nothing about what she was going to do. This was simply her duty. The humans would die, and the Dominion would grow stronger. That was the way of things. Admiral, a sensor officer, reported, the humans have detected us. We are receiving multiple transmission signals from their world. Attempts at communication. Zarin did not even bother to ask what they were saying. It would be the same thing every primitive species said when the cleansing fleet arrived. Please, why? We mean no harm. We surrender. The words changed, but the fear was always the same. Ignore them, she commanded. Begin primary bombardment. Target their largest population centers. The Divine Wrath's weapons officer entered the firing sequence. Across the fleet, 1,400 warships powered their main cannons. The weapons hummed with enough energy to crack a continent. Primary targets locked, the weapons officer announced. Awaiting your command. Admiral. Zarin allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Another world would fall to the Dominion. Another species would learn its place in the universe. Fire beams of burning light shot across the darkness of space. They crossed the distance between the fleet and Earth in seconds. The first beam struck a city called Sao Paulo. 9 million humans lived there. They had no warning, no time to run, no time to scream. One moment they existed, the next moment they were ash and memory. The second beam hit Mumbai. 12 million souls vanished in a flash of white heat. The third beam erased Legos. 7 million more lives ended in less than 3 minutes. The Vithari Dominion killed 18 million human beings. Admiral Zarin watched the destruction on her viewscreen with professional interest. The craters where the cities had been glowed orange with molten rock. Massive clouds of smoke and debris rose into the atmosphere across the rest of the planet. The humans would be watching. They would be understanding finally that they were not alone in the universe, and that the universe was not kind. Impressive yield, Zarin commented. Continue bombardment. Target military installations next. But before the order could be executed, something unexpected happened. The human transmissions stopped. Every signal from the planet suddenly went silent. No more desperate pleas, no more attempts at communication, nothing but radio silence. From a world of 8 billion beings, fleet Captain Morvax frowned at his console. Admiral, this is unusual. Most species increase their transmissions when under attack. They beg, they threaten, they pray. These humans have simply stopped talking. Zarin felt the first small flicker of unease in her stomach. She dismissed it immediately. The humans were probably in shock. Their primitive minds could not process what was happening to them. They are afraid, she said. Continue the bombardment. More Beams of light rained down on Earth. Military bases vanished, industrial centers melted, the humans primitive. Space stations fell from orbit in burning pieces. Within 6 hours, humanity had lost 100 million people and most of their military capability, and still they said nothing. On Earth, the silence was not fear, it was focus. In a bunker beneath the mountains of Colorado, the leaders of the world's nations had gathered. Presidents in prime, ministers, generals, and admirals, scientists and strategists, they sat around a massive table, watching screens that showed the destruction happening across their world. Some were crying, some were praying, but all of them were listening to the woman who stood at the head of the table. Her name was Elena Vasquez. She was a general in the United States Air Force, and she was the highest-ranking military officer still alive. The attack had killed the president, the Joint Chiefs, and most of the world's senior leadership. Command had fallen to her by simple survival. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice steady despite the horror on the screen, "we have approximately 6 hours before they finish their bombardment and begin landing ground forces. In that time, we need to make a decision." Prime Minister of what had been the United Kingdom spoke up. His voice was hollow. "What decision is there to make? We have no weapons that can touch them. Our missiles cannot penetrate their shields. Our aircraft cannot reach orbit. We are helpless." "No," Vasquez replied, "we are not helpless. We are outgunned. Those are different things." She pressed a button on the table. Screens changed to show a schematic. A strange angular spacecraft that no human had ever built 30 years ago. "We recovered debris from an extraterrestrial craft that crashed in the Pacific Ocean. We have spent 3 decades studying it, reverse engineering it, trying to understand it. We never went public because we didn't know what was out there. We didn't know if there were threats." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Now we know, and now we have a choice. We can surrender, beg for mercy, and hope these invaders are kind. Or we can fight." The president of Russia leaned forward. His country had just lost Moscow. His eyes were red, but his voice was hard. "You said we cannot touch them. What has changed?" "Nothing has changed yet," Vasquez admitted, "but it can. The technology from that crashed ship, we understand it. Now we can build ships. We can build weapons, but not in 6 hours. We need time, months, maybe years. We don't have months." The Chinese premier said, "We have hours, then we buy time." Vasquez's eyes swept across the room. "We go dark. Complete communication blackout. We make them think we've given up. We hide our survivors, our scientists, our resources. We dig in deep and we let them think they've won. And then..." Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator. "And then we show them what humanity does. When someone tries to kill us, we are the species that survived ice ages. We are the species that conquered plagues, that killed half our population. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon and built thinking machines. We have been fighting and surviving since we crawled out of caves and sharpened sticks into spears." She slammed her hand on the table. "These invaders think they are conquerors. They think they are strong, but they have never faced anything like us. They have never faced a species that refuses to die. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not asking you to hope for survival. I am asking you to commit to victory, total, complete, absolute victory, not just defense of our world but the destruction of the empire that attacked us. The room was silent. On the screens, another city burned. Then the president of Russia stood up. The Russian Federation commits all surviving resources to this war. The Chinese premier rose next. The People's Republic stands with humanity. One by one they stood, old enemies who had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for decades, nations that had fought wars over borders and resources and ideology. All of them rose and all of them spoke the same word. Yes, General Elena Vasquez nodded. Then let's get to work. We have a species to save and an empire to burn. Admiral Zarin completed her bombardment 3 days later. The human world was scarred and smoking, but still intact. She had followed standard Dominion protocol: destroy military capability, eliminate major population centers, leave enough infrastructure for future mining operations. Her preliminary scans showed that approximately 5 billion humans had survived the initial attack. They had fled to rural areas, to mountains, to places where the Dominion's weapons could not easily reach. This was expected. The survivors would be rounded up later for processing. Deploy ground forces. Zarin commanded. Begin pacification operations. The first Vathari soldiers landed on Earth 8 hours later. They expected to find a broken species, terrified and ready to submit. They had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same: initial resistance followed by surrender, followed by complete subjugation. The humans did not follow the pattern. In the forests of Canada, a Vathari patrol was ambushed by humans armed with simple projectile weapons. The Vathari soldiers laughed at first. Bullets could not penetrate their armor, but then the humans revealed their true weapons: explosives strapped to their own bodies. They ran directly at the Vathari soldiers and detonated themselves. The entire patrol was killed, not by superior technology but by sheer suicidal determination. Similar reports came from across the planet. In the mountains of Afghanistan, humans collapsed tunnels on Vathari squads. In the jungles of Brazil, poisoned water supplies killed hundreds of soldiers. In the cities of Japan, humans who had hidden in the rubble attacked with knives and hammers and bare hands. None of these attacks seriously damaged the occupation force. The Vathari had millions of soldiers and the humans had no real weapons, but the attacks never stopped. Every day more Vathari died. Every night more human strikes hit supply lines and communication centers. Admiral Zarin read the reports with growing irritation. These creatures are insane. They cannot win. Why do they continue to fight? Fleet Captain Morvax had no answer. Perhaps they do not understand that they have lost. Then we will teach them. Zarin and LT Unk and GT, as 4 eyes narrowed with anger, increased bombardment. For every Vari soldier killed, destroy one of their remaining cities. We will teach them the cost of resistance. The order was given. More cities burned, more millions died, and still the humans fought in the bunker beneath the mountains. General Vasquez received reports of the destruction. She read each one carefully, and she mourned every death, but she did not despair. The resistance was working not to defeat the Vari. That was impossible with current technology, but to distract them, to keep their attention on the Surface while something else happened in. Secret, deep underground in facilities. The Vithari had not discovered human. Scientists worked around the clock. They studied captured Vithari weapons. They examined the crashed ship's technology. They combined alien engineering with human innovation. 3 months after the invasion began, the first human energy weapon was tested. It worked. 4 months after the invasion, the first human shield generator came online. It held. 5 months after the invasion, construction began on humanity's first faster than light spacecraft. It was crude, ugly, and built from salvaged parts. Human engineers called it the Defiance. 6 months after the invasion, the Defiance launched in secret from a hidden base in Antarctica. It carried a crew of 50 volunteers who knew they would probably never return. As the small ship shot into space, Admiral Zarin detected nothing. Her sensors were focused on ground resistance. She never thought to look up. Why would she? The humans were primitive. They had no space capability. The Defiance reached the edge of the solar system and activated its faster than light drive. It vanished in a flash of light, carrying humanity's message to the wider galaxy. On its hull, painted in red letters, were words in 100 human languages. They all said the same thing: we are coming. In her bunker, General Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. The first phase was complete. The Vithari Empire had struck humanity first. They had no idea what they had started. Admiral Exer stood before the holographic display in her command center, studying the map of the conquered world below. 6 months had passed since the invasion began, and the situation was not proceeding as expected. The ground resistance continued, small and annoying, like insects biting at the skin, but something else bothered her more deeply. The humans had gone quiet. Not completely silent. There were still attacks, still small acts of sabotage and guerrilla warfare, but the coordinated communication they had detected in the early days had vanished. No radio signals between resistance groups, no intercepted transmissions discussing strategy, nothing but scattered, isolated attacks that seemed to have no central command. Report, Zarin. Commanded fleet. Captain Morvex stepped forward. Ground forces continue pacification operations. We have established control over 73% of the habitable surface. Resistance remains active in mountainous regions and dense forests, but they pose no strategic threat. What about their leadership? Have we located their command structure? Morvex hesitated. No, Admiral, we have captured thousands of prisoners and interrogated them extensively. None of them know where their leaders are hiding. Many of them seem to genuinely believe that their leadership was killed in the initial bombardment. Zarin made a sound of frustration. That is impossible. Someone is coordinating these attacks. Someone is giving orders. Perhaps they are operating in complete small groups with no connection to each other. Perhaps. Zarin turned back to the display, but something feels wrong. These humans fought with such determination in the early weeks. They threw themselves at our soldiers with no regard for their own lives. Now the attacks continue, but the fire seems different, almost mechanical. She could not explain the feeling in her stomach. It was not fear. Vithari admirals did not feel fear. It was more like the sensation of being watched by something she could not see. Continue operations. She ordered an increased scanning of their underground facilities. They are hiding something, I want to know what. Deep beneath the surface of the earth, in tunnels that had been dug by machines. Working day and night, humanity was indeed hiding something, General Elena. Vasquez walked through the underground complex known as Haven 7. It was one of 12 secret facilities that had been constructed since the invasion began. The Vithari scanners had not detected them because they were built with materials that absorbed sensor signals. Human scientists had figured out how to do this after studying captured Vithari equipment. Vasquez stopped at a massive window that looked into an enormous underground cavern. Inside the cavern, thousands of workers swarmed over the skeleton of a spacecraft. It was much larger than the Defiance, nearly a kilometer long, with angular lines and powerful engines that glowed with blue light. How is construction proceeding? She asked the man standing beside her. Dr. James Chen was the lead scientist of the Human Recovery Project. He was thin and exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes from months of sleeping only 3 or 4 hours a night. But when he looked at the ship, his eyes shone with something like joy. Ahead of schedule, General, the Victory will be ready for launch in 4 months, and she won't be alone. He gestured to a screen on the wall. It showed 12 similar facilities around the world. In each one a ship was being built, 12 capital ships, each one equipped with weapons that match or exceed Vithari technology, shields that can withstand sustained bombardment, faster than light drives that are actually more efficient than theirs. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. More efficient? How is that possible? We only started studying this technology 6 months ago. Chen smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine, because we're not just copying them, General. We're improving on them. Human engineers looked at Vithari designs and immediately saw dozens of ways to make them better. Their technology is old. They've been using the same designs for thousands of years because they've never had to innovate. They've never faced competition. He pulled up another screen showing weapon specifications. Their energy weapons are powerful but inefficient. Ours use the same principles but deliver 30% more damage with 20% less energy. Their shields are strong but have predictable frequency patterns. Our shields adapt in real time to incoming fire. Their ships are large and impressive, but they're designed for intimidation, not efficiency. You're saying we can build better ships than an empire that's been spacefaring for 12,000 years? I'm saying we already have. Chen's smile faded. Humans are different, General. We evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. Predators, disease, the weather, each other. We learned to adapt or die. The Vithari conquered their home world easily and then spent thousands of years conquering others who couldn't fight back. They've never had to truly struggle. They've never had to innovate under pressure. Vasquez nodded slowly. She had thought something similar herself. The Vithari were conquerors, but they were lazy conquerors. They used overwhelming force against primitive species because they had never needed to develop better tactics. What about personnel? She asked. Ships are useless without crews. We have training facilities in all 12 havens. Pilots, weapons officers, engineers, marines. We're training them using simulations based on captured Vithari data. By the time the ships are ready, we'll have crews ready to fly them, and the resistance on the surface changed. Expression grew somber, they're doing their job, keeping the V-Thari distracted, making them think we're beaten. They know they can't win the fights they're in, they're dying to buy us time. Vasquez felt the weight of those words. Every day humans died, fighting the occupation. Every day people sacrificed themselves so that the underground facilities could continue working undetected. The debt humanity owed to those fighters could never be repaid. Their sacrifice will mean something, she said quietly. I promise you that. 3 more months passed. Underground facilities hummed with activity. Ships were completed, crews were trained, weapons were tested. Humanity prepared for a war that most of the species did not even know was coming. On the surface, the occupation continued. The Vethari had established mining operations, extracting resources from Earth and shipping them back to the Dominion. They had also begun what they called processing, sorting the surviving human population into categories. Some were designated for slave labor, others were marked for genetic experimentation. The elderly and the sick were simply eliminated as inefficient. Admiral Zarin oversaw these operations with professional detachment. She had done this many times before on many worlds. The humans were no different from any other conquered species. They would serve the Dominion or they would die. But the strange feeling in her stomach never went away. The silence from the humans bothered her. Other species, when conquered, eventually accepted their fate. They stopped fighting, started cooperating, tried to make the best of their situation. The humans did not do this. They continued to resist, even though resistance was clearly pointless. And they did it without any apparent coordination, any central command, any hope of victory. It was almost as if they were waiting for something. One day, a Vithari scout ship disappeared near the 4th planet of the human system. The ship had been conducting routine patrols, mapping the outer regions for future resource extraction. It simply vanished without sending any distress signal. Zarin ordered an investigation. A patrol was sent to the last known location of the scout ship. They found nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no evidence that the ship had ever existed. Equipment malfunction. Fleet Captain Morvac suggested perhaps their reactor destabilized. A reactor destabilization would leave traces. Zarin replied, radiation debris. Something. This ship simply disappeared. What else could it be? The humans have no space capability. Zarin did not answer. She did not know what else it could be, but she ordered increased patrols in the outer system just to be safe. 2 weeks later, another scout ship vanished, then another, then 12 more. All in the span of a single day. Now, Zarin was genuinely alarmed. She sent a full battle group, 50 warships, to investigate the disappearances. They jumped to the outer system and began scanning. They found nothing unusual. No enemy ships, no hidden bases, no explanation for the missing scouts. The battle group commander reported that the area was completely empty. Then his transmission cut off mid-sentence. 50 warships were never heard from again. In the underground complex of Haven 1, General Vasquez received the report with grim satisfaction. Confirmation from the Defiance, her communications officer, announced the battle group has been neutralized. No survivors, no distress signal sent. Vasquez nodded. The Defiance and her sister ships 12 small, fast attack craft that had been launched. Over the past months had been hunting Vithari patrols in the outer system. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Vithari still did not know they existed. How long? Until the main fleet is ready, she asked. Dr. Chan answered, the Victory and her escorts are fully operational. All 12 capital ships are crewed and armed. We're ready. General Vasquez took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had sacrificed so much to reach. Millions had died to give humanity this chance. Now it was time to see if their sacrifice had been worth it. Begin final preparations, she ordered. We launch in 48 hours. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. Underground hangars opened, revealing ships that had been built in secret. Crews boarded their vessels, running final checks on weapons and shields. Pilots strapped into cockpits and powered up engines. In Haven 7, Vasquez boarded the Victory. The ship was magnificent, a kilometer of human engineering and alien technology combined into something entirely new. Its hull was armored with materials that could withstand direct hits from Vithari weapons. Its guns could punch through shields that had never been breached. Its engines could cross the galaxy. Days, the bridge of the Victory was filled with officers from every nation on Earth: American, Chinese, Russian, Indian, European, African, South American. They had all come together for this moment. Old hatreds and old divisions meant nothing now. They were all simply human. Vasquez took her place in the command chair. The main view screen showed the interior of the underground cavern, with the ship sitting in its construction cradle above them. Hundreds of meters of rock separated them from the surface, and the Vithari occupation force. All ships report ready, Admiral, her first officer announced. Admiral, they had given her a new rank for this new war. She was no longer just a general commanding ground forces. She was the commander of humanity's first space fleet. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered. A moment later, her voice was being broadcast to every vessel in the human recovery fleet. This is Admiral Vasquez. 10 months ago, the Vithari Dominion attacked our world without warning and without mercy. They killed hundreds of millions of our people. They conquered our planet. They thought they had destroyed us. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. Some were afraid, some were angry, all of them were determined. They were wrong. Humanity does not give up. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity fights. We have spent these months building in secret, preparing for this moment. Now it is time to show the Dominion what happens when you attack our home. She stood from her chair. We are going to take back our planet. We are going to destroy their occupation fleet, and then we are going to carry this war to their doorstep. They struck first. They will not strike last. She sat back down. All ships begin launch sequence. The cavern began to shake. Above them, massive doors opened in the surface of the earth, disguised as mountains and valleys. 12 capital ships and hundreds of smaller escorts rose from their hiding places, their engines burning bright against the sky. On the surface, their soldiers looked up in shock. They had been told the humans had no space capability. They had been told the conquest was complete. Now, massive warships were rising from the ground, blocking out the sun. Admiral Zarin was in her command center when the Alarms began screaming. She ran to her tactical display and felt her blood freeze in her veins. Human ships, dozens of them, no hundreds, rising from the surface and forming into combat formations. Impossible, she whispered. This is impossible, but the display did not lie. The humans had built a fleet, somehow under the very eyes of the occupation force. They had constructed warships that rivaled Vithari cruisers. All ships battle stations, Zarin commanded, her voice cracking for the first time in her centuries-long career. Engage the enemy, destroy them. The Vithari fleet moved to intercept. They still had superior numbers, hundreds of ships against the human fleet, but for the first time, Admiral Zarin felt something she had never felt before. Fear. The human fleet did not retreat. It did not run. It formed into a tight formation, shields glowing, weapons charging, and then Admiral Vasquez's voice echoed across every frequency in the system. Vithari fleet, this is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Space Navy. You invaded our world. You killed our people. You thought we were helpless. You were wrong. Today we take back our planet. Tomorrow we take back our future, and to your empire too. Every world in the Dominion, I deliver this message. Run while you can. Humanity is awake, and we are coming. The first shots of the Battle of Earth were fired moments later. Admiral Zarin watched in horror as her ships began to die. The human weapons were not supposed to be this powerful. The human shields were not supposed to hold, but both statements were clearly wrong. Human energy beams sliced through Vithari cruisers like hot knives through butter. Human shields absorbed hits that should have destroyed them. Return fire. Maximum power. Zarin screamed. Her ships fired with everything they had. Beams of destruction that had leveled cities struck the human fleet. The shields flickered, glowed, held. How was this possible? On the bridge of the Victory, Vasquez watched her displays with fierce concentration. The battle was going well, better than she had hoped, but it was not over. The Vithari still had superior numbers. Target their flagship, she ordered. All ships concentrate fire. 12 human capital ships turned their weapons on the divine wrath. The Vithari flagship's shields flared under the combined assault. Zarin felt her ships shudder as human weapons hammered her shields. The power readings were impossible. These primitive creatures, the species they had dismissed as insignificant, were matching Vithari military technology. No, they were exceeding it. Admiral Shields failing, her tactical officer shouted. Retreat, Zarin commanded. All ships retreat to hyperspace coordinates, now. The Vithari fleet tried to run, but they humans had anticipated this. Small, fast attack ships, the same ones that had been hunting scouts in the outer system, blocked the retreat routes. They were everywhere, appearing out of nowhere, striking with surgical precision. The Battle of Earth lasted 11 hours. When it was over, only 73 Vithari ships remained. From the original fleet of 1,400, Admiral Zarin was among the survivors, but just barely. The divine wrath had lost half its hull and most of its weapons. It limped toward the hyperspace threshold, surrounded by the shattered remains of Vithari power. As they fled, every communication channel in the surviving fleet crackled with a single transmission, a human voice speaking. Perfect Vari, tell your emperor we are coming. Zarin heard those words and felt something break inside her. For the first time in her 300 years, she understood what it felt like to be the prey instead of the predator. The humans were not a primitive species waiting for extinction. They were a storm that had been waiting to be unleashed, and now nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The 73 surviving ships of the Vithari cleansing fleet limped through hyperspace, carrying with them news that would shake the foundations of an empire. Admiral Zarin sat alone in her quarters, staring at the wall. Her four eyes saw nothing. Her mind was trapped in the memory of what had happened. She had lost 1,300 warships to a species that was supposed to be primitive. She had been driven from a world that should have been easy prey, and now she had to return to Vithar Prime and tell Emperor Thavarak that the humans were not just alive, they were coming for blood. Journey back to the heart of the Dominion took 2 weeks, 2 weeks of silence as the broken fleet crawled home, 2 weeks for Zarin to think about every decision she had made, every assumption she had trusted, every report she had ignored. The humans had been building under her feet while she had been processing prisoners and establishing mining operations. They had been constructing a war machine in secret, and she had not seen it. She had not even suspected it when the fleet finally emerged from hyperspace above Vethar Prime. A communication signal immediately demanded her presence at the Imperial Palace. Zarin had expected this. She had been preparing herself for death since the battle ended. Emperor Thavarak sat on his throne of conquered metals, his ancient face twisted with rage. The chamber was filled with military advisors, senators, and nobles, all of them watching as Admiral Zarin walked forward and knelt before the throne. Explain, the Emperor commanded. His voice was soft, which was far more terrifying than shouting. Zarin kept her eyes on the floor. Great One, the humans were not what we expected. They had developed technology in secret. They built ships underground, hidden from our sensors. When they emerged, silence. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. Zarin stopped speaking. I did not ask for excuses, Thavarak continued. I asked for an explanation. 1,300 ships destroyed by primitives. Primitives who, according to your reports, had no space capability. Primitives who had been defeated. Primitives who were being processed for slave labor. He stood from his throne and walked down the steps towards Erin. Despite her military training, she felt her body tense with fear. The Vithari Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We have destroyed civilization that possessed technology far beyond what you described, and yet you lost to creatures who were using chemical rockets a single rotation of their world ago. Zarin forced herself to speak. Great One, I do not understand it myself. Their technology should not have been possible. They reverse engineered our systems in months, then improved upon them. Their weapons were more powerful than ours. Their shields were stronger. Their tactics were there. Tactics were what? Zarin hesitated. She did not want to say the next words, but the Emperor demanded honesty. Their tactics were superior. Great One, they adapted to everything we tried. Every strategy I deployed, they countered. Within minutes, it was as if they could predict what we would do before we did it. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The rage was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something that might have been Curiosity, tell me about these humans. Everything you learned. Zarin looked up. Surprised, she had expected execution. Not questions, they are a young species. Great One, their civilization is perhaps 10,000 years old, but in that time they have developed technology at an incredible rate. More importantly, they are a violent species. They have been fighting each other since they first developed tools, wars, conflicts, competition. It is built into their nature. We have encountered violent species before. They were easy to conquer. The humans are different. Great One, their violence is not random. It is focused, strategic, adaptable. They do not fight like beasts. They fight like predators, and they do not stop. Even when facing certain defeat, they continue fighting. They threw themselves at our soldiers with no regard for their own survival. They attacked with weapons that could not harm us, simply to delay us, to buy time. She paused, gathering her courage for what she had to say. Next, I believe they were never defeated. Great One, they allowed us to think we had won. They sacrificed millions of their own people to distract us while they built their fleet. Everything we saw, the resistance, the guerrilla attacks, the apparent chaos, it was all a deception. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. The chamber held its breath. Finally, Thavarak returned to his throne. These humans are more interesting than I expected. Perhaps they will provide a challenge worthy of the Dominion. He turned to his military advisors. Assemble the Grand Fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. We will go to the human system and crush them once and for all. One of the advisors stepped forward. Great One, that will take time. The Grand Fleet is spread across our territory. Gathering it will require. I do not care how long it takes. Thavarak interrupted. Begin immediately and send word to all our subject worlds. Any species that thinks this defeat is an opportunity for rebellion will be reminded of what happens to those who defy the Dominion. He waved his hand, dismissing the chamber, but as Zarin rose to leave, the Emperor spoke again. Admiral, she stopped and turned. Great One, you will remain in command of the war against the humans. You understand them better than anyone. You have seen what they can do. Find a way to defeat them. Zarin bowed. Yes, Great One. As she walked out of the chamber, she felt the weight of impossible expectations on her shoulders. The Emperor wanted her to defeat a species that had humiliated her completely. She had no idea how to do it, but deep in her mind, a small voice whispered a terrible truth. The humans had said they were coming, and she believed them. On Earth, the liberation had begun. The Battle of Earth had destroyed the Vithari occupation fleet, but thousands of enemy soldiers remained. On the surface, they had retreated to fortified positions when their ships were destroyed, hoping to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Reinforcements would never come. Admiral Vasquez coordinated the ground campaign from the Victory, working with resistance leaders who had survived the occupation. Human forces emerged from hiding all across the planet. They were not an organized army. They were farmers and factory workers, teachers and engineers, ordinary people who had been waiting for this moment, but they were not helpless anymore. The underground facilities had produced more than ships. They had produced weapons, energy, rifles and plasma grenades, equipment that matched what the Vithari soldiers carried. For the first time, humans could fight their occupiers on equal terms. The ground war lasted 3 weeks. The Vithari soldiers fought hard, but they were cut off from supply and support. One by one their fortified positions fell. Some surrendered when they realized the situation was hopeless. Others fought to the death. Vasquez watched the final stronghold fall from orbit. It was a Vithari base that had been built in the ruins of Moscow, where millions of humans had died in the initial bombardment. When the base fell, human soldiers planted a flag in the rubble, not the flag of any single nation, but a new flag that had been designed in the underground facilities, a blue globe on a field of stars representing Earth in its place in the universe. Humanity was free, but Vasquez knew this was only the beginning. She called a meeting of the senior officers of the human fleet. They gathered in the conference room of the Victory, representatives from every nation that had contributed to the war effort. Chinese admirals sat next to American generals. Russian officers shared tables with European commanders. The old divisions of Earth meant nothing in the face of what was coming. The Vither will return. Vasquez began. Our scouts in their territory report massive fleet movements. They're gathering every ship they have for a counterattack. We estimate their full military strength at approximately 9 million warships. Room was silent. 9 million ships. The human fleet numbered less than 1,000. We cannot defeat them in a direct battle. Vasquez continued. Not yet, but we don't have to. The Vithari Dominion is not a single enemy. It's an empire built on conquest. They rule over thousands of subject species, all of whom hate them. Our strategy is not just to fight the Dominion, it's to destroy it from within. She activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. The Dominion was highlighted red, covering a vast portion of the Orion Spur. We've made contact with resistance movements on over 200 Dominion worlds, species who have been enslaved for centuries, waiting for any chance to break free. We're going to give them that chance. She highlighted several points on the map. Phase 1. Strike teams will attack supply lines and communication networks throughout the Dominion. Will cut their fleet off from support and make it impossible for them to coordinate a unified response. She highlighted more points. Phase 2. We arm the resistance movements. We share our technology freely with any species willing to fight. The Vithari have kept their subjects primitive by denying them advanced weapons. We're going to change that. She highlighted a final point, a world deep in Dominion territory. Phase 3. When the time is right, we strike at Vithar Prime itself. Not to conquer, but to deliver a message. The Dominion is not invincible. They can be beaten, and when the subject species see that the Empire will tear itself apart, a Chinese admiral spoke up. This plan will take years, possibly decades. How do we keep Earth safe in the meantime? We don't stay at Earth. Vasquez replied, our planet is our home, but it's also a target. The Vithari know where it is. If we try to defend it with our full force, they'll simply overwhelm us with numbers. She changed the display to show a region of space far from Earth. We're establishing mobile bases throughout human-controlled space. Our fleet will stay moving, striking where the enemy is weak and retreating when they're strong. The Vither are used to fighting stationary target civilizations that defend their home worlds and wait to be destroyed. we're not going to give them that option, the officers murmured among themselves. This strategy was bold, perhaps too bold. It meant abandoning Earth to possible attack. It meant fighting a war of constant movement against an enemy with overwhelming numbers. But what choice did they have? A Russian general stood. The Russian Federation supports this plan. We have spent centuries defending our homeland against invasions. We know how to fight when outnumbered. We know how to survive until victory is possible. One by one, the other officers voiced their support. The plan was risky, but it was the only chance humanity had. Vasquez nodded, grateful for their trust. Then we begin. Immediately, within the week, our fleet will disperse to begin operations throughout the Dominion. This war will not be won in a single battle. It will be won through 1,000 cuts, million acts of resistance, an entire galaxy rising up against tyranny. She looked at each of her officers in turn. The Vithari struck humanity first. They thought we would be easy prey. They were wrong. Now it's our turn. Let's show them what happens when you wake up a sleeping species. The war that followed was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Human strike teams appeared without warning throughout the Dominion. They attacked supply convoys, destroyed communication stations, and assassinated military commanders. They moved like ghosts, striking quickly and disappearing before the Vethari could respond. On world after world, oppressed species received visits from human diplomats. These diplomats brought gifts, weapons, shield generators, medical supplies, technical knowledge. They asked for nothing in return except one thing: the willingness to fight. The response was overwhelming. Species that had been crushed under Vari rule for millennia suddenly found hope. Rebellion sparked across the empire. Factory worlds stopped producing weapons for the Dominion and started producing them for themselves. Agricultural worlds that had been feeding the Vethari military burned their crops rather than let them be shipped off world. Emperor Thavarak watched his empire begin to crack and felt something he had never felt in his 10,000 years of life. Uncertainty. The humans are not just fighting us, he said to Admiral Zarin during a strategic meeting. They're turning our own subjects against us. Every world we lose reduces our ability to project power. Every rebellion we crush diverts resources from the main fleet. Zarin nodded grimly. She had been studying human history, trying to understand these impossible creatures. What she found had disturbed her deeply. The humans have experience with this kind of warfare, great one. Their history is filled with examples of small forces defeating great empires through similar tactics. They call it asymmetric warfare, using the enemy's size and power against them. And how do we counter this? I do not know, great one. Every strategy I can think of, they seem to have already anticipated. It is as if they have fought this exact war before. The truth was simpler than Zarin realized. Humans had not fought this exact war before, but they had fought countless wars like it. Their species had spent its entire existence developing the art of warfare. They had generals who had studied the campaigns of ancient empires and revolutionaries who had overthrown tyrants. They had tacticians who had wargamed every possible scenario, and soldiers who had been trained to adapt to any situation. The Vithari had conquered through overwhelming force. They had never needed to be clever because they had always been stronger. Now they faced an enemy who was weaker in numbers but infinitely more creative in how they used what they had, and humanity was just getting started. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Vasquez led a fleet of 200 ships in a raid on a major Vari shipyard. The attack was perfectly coordinated. Human ships emerged from hyperspace at multiple points, overwhelming the defenses before they could respond. By the time Vithari reinforcements arrived, the shipyard was destroyed and the human fleet had vanished. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, human agents helped organize a massive uprising on Turvok 3, a mining world that had supplied the Dominion with rare metals for 8,000 years. Uprising succeeded and suddenly the Dominion lost access to materials essential for building warships. 9 months after the Battle of Earth, a human special operations team infiltrated a Vari military base and stole complete technical readouts of the Grand Fleet defensive systems. That information was immediately shared with every resistance movement in the Dominion. Each victory was small by itself. The Dominion still had millions of ships and controlled thousands of worlds, but each victory chipped away at their power, weakened their position, and strengthened the coalition that was forming against them. And throughout the galaxy the message spread, the message that humanity had delivered at the Battle of Earth, the message that was now being whispered in slave quarters and shouted in resistance strongholds on 1,000 worlds. Run while you can. The humans are coming, and they do not forget. 2 years had passed since the Vithari Dominion first attacked Earth. 2 years of blood and fire and desperate struggle. 2 years that had transformed humanity from a single world species into something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Resolute, the new flagship of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. The Victory had been destroyed 6 months ago in a battle near the Carrick Nebula, taking 200 Vithari ships with her before she died. Vasquez had escaped in a shuttle, watching her ship explode through a port hole. She had mourned for exactly 1 hour, then transferred her flag to the Resolute and continued the war. That was the human way. Mourn the dead, then keep fighting. The Resolute was larger than the Victory had been, bristling with weapons that human engineers continued to improve. The fleet around her had grown as well, not just human ships anymore, but vessels from dozens of species that had joined the fight against the Dominion. Turvok mining ships converted to war fighters, Kilani cruisers whose crews had mutinied against their Vari masters, even a squadron of Vrexian battleships, a species that had been conquered so long ago they had forgotten their own history until human historians helped them recover it. The war had changed everything. The Dominion had expected to crush the human home world and move on. Instead, they found themselves fighting on 1,000 fronts against an enemy that would not stay still and would not stop. Vasquez reviewed the latest intelligence reports on her personal display. The news was mixed, as it always was. The Dominion still controlled most of the galaxy. Their Grand Fleet was still the largest military force in existence, but the cracks in their empire were spreading wider every day. Admirals, her communications officer, announced incoming transmission from command. Priority Alpha. Vasquez nodded. Priority Alpha meant news that could change the course of the war. She stepped into her private office and activated the secure channel. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to General Marcus Webb, who commanded human forces in the Perseus sector. He looked exhausted but excited. Alina, we've had a breakthrough. Our intelligence teams have located the Dominion's main communication hub. It's a station in the Vethar system itself, in orbit around one of the gas giants. Every military order, every fleet coordination, every strategic communication goes through that station. Vasquez felt her pulse quicken. If we could destroy it there, fleet coordination would collapse. Individual commanders would be operating blind, unable to receive orders from the Emperor or communicate with each other. It would buy us months, maybe years. What's the catch? Webb's excitement faded slightly. The station is heavily defended. 300 warships in permanent garrison, plus whatever reserves they can pull from nearby systems, and it's deep in enemy territory. Any force we send would be fighting its way through dozens of Dominion-controlled systems just to reach the target. We've done raids in enemy territory before. Nothing like this. This would require significant fleet, enough ships to actually threaten the station. And once we engage, there's no guarantee we could get out. The Dominion would throw everything they have at us. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. The risk was enormous, but the potential reward was worth it. Send me everything you have on the station's defenses. I'll put together a plan. 1 month later, a fleet of 500 ships gathered at a hidden rendezvous point near the edge of Dominion space. It was the largest offensive force humanity had ever assembled. Not just human ships, but vessels from 15 different species that had joined the coalition against the Dominion. Vasquez addressed her combined fleet from the bridge of the Resolute. Her image was broadcast to every ship in the Armada. What we're about to attempt has never been done, she began. No species has ever struck at the heart of the Vethari Dominion. No fleet has ever entered the Vethar system as an enemy. The Vari believe their home is untouchable. Today, we prove them wrong. She paused, letting her words sink in. I won't lie to you, this mission is dangerous. Many of us will not return. But if we succeed, we deal a blow to the Dominion that they may never recover from. We show every oppressed species in the galaxy that the Vethari can be hurt, that they can bleed, that they can fall. She straightened in her command chair. 2 years ago, the Dominion attacked Earth without provocation. They killed millions of our people. They thought we would be easy victims. Instead, we became their worst nightmare. Now it's time to bring that nightmare to their doorstep. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. We're going hunting. The fleet vanished in a flash of light. The journey to the Vethar system took 2 weeks, jumping through a series of waypoints that had been scouted by human reconnaissance ships. The fleet traveled through the night, silent and unseen, slipping past Dominion patrols and avoiding heavily defended systems. They lost 30 ships along the way. Some were detected and destroyed by enemy forces. Others suffered mechanical failures in the uncharted regions of space they were traveling through. Each loss was felt throughout the fleet, but the mission continued. When they finally emerged from hyperspace in the Vethar system, the defenders were completely unprepared. The Dominion communication hub hung in orbit around a massive gas Giant, a sprawling station bristling with antenna and transmission arrays. The 300 warships that guarded it were deployed in a defensive formation around the station, ready to repel any attack. They were not ready for what arrived. All ships attack pattern Omega. Vasquez commanded, concentrate fire on their defense grid, clear a path to the station. The coalition fleet surged forward in a coordinated assault. Human ships led the charge, their superior shields absorbing the first volley of Vithari fire. Behind them came the Allied vessels, adding their weapons to the barrage. The Battle of the Communication Hub was a desperate, brutal affair. The Vithari garrison fought with the fury of defenders protecting their homeland. Ships exploded on both sides as the battle raged around the massive station. Vasquez watched her tactical display with iron concentration. The plan was working, but the losses were heavy. 100 coalition ships had already been destroyed, with more falling every minute. Admiral, we've cleared a corridor to the station, her tactical officer reported, but Dominion reinforcements are inbound. We have approximately 30 minutes before they arrive. That's enough. All bomber squadrons, begin your attack run. Take that station down. Small, fast human attack crafts shot through the gap in the enemy formation. They were loaded with specialized weapons designed to penetrate the station's shields, weapons that human scientists had developed specifically for this mission. The Vithari garrison commander realized too late what was happening. He ordered his ships to intercept the bombers, but the coalition fleet pressed the attack, keeping the defenders occupied. The first bomb struck the station's primary transmission array. The explosion was massive, sending debris spinning into the void. More bombs followed, each one targeting critical systems. The station's shields flickered, failed, then collapsed entirely. The final bomb hit the station's reactor. The explosion lit up the sky above the gas giant. Vithari Dominion's primary communication hub, the nerve center of their entire military operation, vanished in a ball of fire. Throughout the Dominion, military channels went silent. Fleet commanders who had been receiving real-time orders from the Emperor suddenly found themselves alone. The Dominion war machine, which had operated as a unified force for 12,000 years, suddenly became millions of isolated units with no central coordination. On the bridge of the Resolute, Vasquez allowed herself a moment of triumph. Then she turned to more immediate concerns. All ships fall back to the extraction point. We've done what we came to do. The coalition fleet retreated, fighting a running battle against the pursuing Vithari forces. They lost another 80 ships during the withdrawal, but the core of the fleet escaped into hyperspace. They had achieved the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Dominion and survived. Emperor Thavarak received news of the attack while sitting in his throne room. The messenger was a young officer who trembled as he delivered his report. Great One, the communication hub has been destroyed. We have lost all centralized control of the Grand Fleet. Individual commanders are operating on their own initiative, Thorax said. Nothing. His 4 eyes stared straight ahead, seeing nothing. The human fleet escaped. Great One, our pursuit forces were unable to intercept them. Still silent, the loss of the hub has caused chaos throughout the Empire. Several subject worlds are reporting open Rebellion without coordinated military. Response: we cannot leave me. The officer fled the throne room. Thalarak sat alone in the vast chamber, surrounded by the treasures of 12,000 years of conquest. He had ruled the galaxy for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be challenged. Every species he had encountered had either submitted or been destroyed. The natural order of the universe was the strong dominating the weak, and the Vithari had been strong for longer than any other civilization in history. Now a species he had dismissed as insignificant was tearing his empire apart. The humans had done more than destroy a station they had shattered the myth of Vithari invincibility. Every subject world would see this attack and wonder if they could be next to strike a blow. For the first time in his impossibly long life, Thavarak considered the possibility that he might lose. He rejected the thought. Immediately, the Dominion had faced setbacks before and overcome them. Grand Fleet was still the mightiest force in the galaxy. The humans had won a battle, but they could not win the war. He reached for his personal communication device and began issuing orders. The Dominion would rebuild its communication network. The rebellions would be crushed. The humans would be hunted down and destroyed. He would show them what it truly meant to challenge an empire. 3 months after the destruction of the communication hub, Admiral Vasquez received an unexpected message. It came through diplomatic channels that had been established with various species throughout the coalition. The message was from Emperor Thavarak himself. Humans, the Emperor, and LT Unk and GT. Image spoke from the display screen. You have proven yourselves worthy adversaries. The Dominion has not faced such a challenge in thousands of years. I offer you a choice. The image shifted to show a map of the galaxy. Withdraw your forces from Dominion space. Return to your home system. In exchange, the Dominion will recognize Earth as sovereign territory. We will not attack your world again. Your species will be allowed to exist in peace. The image shifted back to the Emperor. This is a generous offer, more generous than any the Dominion has made before. I suggest you consider it carefully. The alternative is the complete destruction of your species. We will bring the full might of the Grand Fleet to your doorstep and reduce your world to ash. The choice is yours. The message ended. Vasquez watched the empty screen for a long moment. Then she called a meeting of the coalition leadership. Representatives from 200 species gathered via holographic link. Human commanders, Turvok generals, Kilani admirals, Vrexian warlords, all of them assembled to hear the Emperor's offer and decide how to respond. Vasquez played the message for them. When it was finished, she asked for opinions. Turvok commander spoke first. The Emperor offers peace because he is afraid. He knows he cannot defeat us in our current position. This offer is weakness disguised as strength. A Kelani admiral disagreed. Perhaps, but the offer is also genuine. The Dominion could destroy Earth if they committed their full force. They have the numbers. The question is whether they are willing to pay the price. Debate continued for hours. Some argued for accepting the offer. Humanity would be safe, and the coalition could continue fighting without the humans. Others argued that accepting would be a betrayal of everything they had fought for. Finally, Vasquez stood and silenced the discussion. I appreciate all of your Opinions, she said, but this decision belongs to humanity. It's our world, our people, our future, and I can tell you right now what our answer will be. She looked around the assembled faces, aliens and humans who had fought and died together for 2 years. The Dominion struck first. They attacked our world. Without warning, they killed our children, our parents, our friends. They thought we were weak. They thought we would kneel. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. Humanity does not kneel. Not to emperors, not to empires, not to anyone. We did not start this war, but we will finish it. We will fight until the Dominion is destroyed and every species they have enslaved is free. She activated the communication system, broadcasting her response across every frequency in the galaxy. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. To Emperor Thavarak, we reject your offer. We will not retreat. We will not surrender. You struck us first across the galaxy. Our voice declares, run while you can. She paused, then continued with cold determination. To every world under Dominion rule, your liberation is coming. Hold on, stay strong. Help is on the way. She deactivated the broadcast and turned to her coalition allies. Now, let's plan our next offensive. The Emperor wants a war. Let's give him one. He'll never forget. The response was unanimous approval. Every species, every commander, every soldier in the coalition committed themselves to the fight. The war continued. In the months that followed, the coalition pressed its advantage. The destruction of the communication hub had fractured the Dominion's ability to coordinate its forces, and the coalition exploited every crack. Human strike teams continued their campaign of sabotage and assassination. Allied fleets attacked vulnerable systems throughout the Dominion. Resistance movements on enslaved worlds grew bolder, launching uprisings that tied down Vari forces. The Emperor responded with brutal force. He ordered the Grand Fleet to crush the rebellion regardless of casualties. Entire worlds were bombed into submission. Millions of beings died as the Dominion tried to restore control. But for every rebellion they crushed, 2 more appeared. For every coalition ship they destroyed, 3 more joined the fight. The Dominion was bleeding from 1,000 wounds, and no amount of force could stop the bleeding. Admiral Zarin, who had been given command of the campaign against the humans, presented her analysis to the Emperor. Great One, we are losing the war of attrition. Our losses are not sustainable. Every ship we lose weakens our ability to project power. Every world that rebels reduces our resources. At the current rate, the Dominion will collapse within a decade. Thorek listened in silence. When Zarin finished, he asked a single question. What do you recommend? Zarin took a deep breath. We must end this war quickly. We must concentrate all our remaining forces on a single decisive strike. Destroy the human leadership and the coalition will fall apart. And where do we find the human leadership? Earth, Zarin said. Despite their strategy of staying mobile, the humans maintain a strong emotional connection to their home world. They have recently begun returning defensive forces to the system. If we strike at Earth with overwhelming force, Admiral Vasquez will have to respond. We can destroy her fleet and break the back of the coalition in a single battle. The Emperor considered this for a long moment. It was a gamble, committing the Grand Fleet to a single engagement left the rest of the empire vulnerable. But Zarin was right. The current strategy was failing. Something dramatic had to change. Do it, he commanded. Assemble the Grand Fleet. Every ship we have, we end this war at the world where it began. Zarin bowed. Yes, great one. As she left the throne room, she felt a strange mixture of emotions. Fear, because she knew how dangerous the humans were. Determination, because this was her chance to avenge her previous defeat. And something else, something that might have been respect. The humans had earned that much. The final battle was coming, and the fate of the galaxy would be decided at a small blue world called Earth. The Grand Fleet of the Vari Dominion gathered in the darkness between stars. 5 million warships assembled at a staging point far from any inhabited system, the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen, concentrated in a single location. They came from every corner of the empire, pulled from garrison duties and patrol routes, leaving behind worlds that would soon fall to rebellion in their absence. Admiral Zarin stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Eternal Vengeance. It was the largest warship in the Dominion fleet, bristling with weapons that could devastate continents. Beside her stood Emperor Thaverak himself, who had chosen to personally command the final battle against humanity. How long until the fleet is fully assembled? The Emperor asked. 2 more days, great one, then we jump to the human system. Thaverak nodded slowly. He stared at the view screen showing the countless ships surrounding them. This was the accumulated power of 12,000 years of conquest. This was the might that had crushed 17 space-faring civilizations and enslaved thousands of worlds. Against this force, the humans could not stand. They will try to run, the Emperor said. They will scatter into the void like they have before. We will not let them. This time we finish what we started. Zarin said nothing. She had studied the humans for 3 years now, and she knew they would not run. Running was not in their nature. They would stand and fight even against impossible odds. That was what made them so dangerous. Across the galaxy, Admiral Elena Vasquez received word that the Grand Fleet was assembling. Her intelligence network had informants throughout the Dominion, and they had been tracking the movement of enemy ships for weeks. She called together the coalition leadership for what might be their final strategic meeting. The Dominion is committing everything to a single attack on Earth. She reported 5 million warships there. Entire military force. The Emperor himself is leading the assault. The holographic images of allied commanders shifted uncomfortably. 5 million ships. The coalition had perhaps 2 million, scattered across hundreds of systems. Even if they could gather every vessel, they would be outnumbered more than 2 to 1. What is your plan, Admiral? The Turvok representative asked. Vasquez smiled. It was a thin, tired smile, but it carried an edge of confidence that had become her trademark. We let them come. Confused murmur spread through the assembly. The Dominion is concentrating all their forces in one place. That means every other system in the Empire is undefended. While they're attacking Earth, we launch simultaneous strikes on 50 key targets throughout Dominion space. Communication stations, shipyards, supply depots, everything. They need to maintain their war effort. And Earth, a human general asked, what about the defense of our home world? Earth will be defended. We've been preparing for this moment since the war began. the planetary defense grid has been upgraded with the most advanced technology we possess in our home. Fleet 800 ships will meet the enemy in orbit 800 against 5 million, Admiral. With respect, that's suicide perhaps. But we don't need to win the battle, we just need to survive it long enough for our other attacks to succeed. When the Dominion returns home, they'll find their empire in ruins, their supply lines destroyed, their shipyards burning, their subject worlds in open revolt. She looked around the assembly. The Emperor has made a fatal mistake. He's gambling everything on destroying Earth. He's betting that when our home world falls, the coalition will collapse. He's wrong. Humanity isn't fighting for a planet, we're fighting for an idea, the idea that every species deserves to be free. That idea doesn't die even if Earth does. The room was silent, but Earth won't die, Vasquez continued, because we're going to show the Dominion something they've never seen. We're going to show them what humanity does when our backs are against the wall. We fight, we survive, and we win. She stood. This is the moment we've been building toward for 3 years. Every battle, every sacrifice, every drop of blood has led to this. The Dominion is about to learn the price of attacking humanity. All ships prepare for battle. This ends now. The Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace around Earth in a wave of fire and light. The sky above the planet darkened as millions of warships blotted out the stars. It was the most terrifying sight any human had ever witnessed. On the surface of Earth, billions of people looked up and saw their death approaching. Many had evacuated to underground shelters built since the war began. Others remained in their homes, refusing to hide. They had survived the initial invasion. They would survive this. In orbit, 800 human ships formed a defensive line between the planet and the approaching armada. They were outnumbered more than 6,000 to 1. By any military calculation, they could not win, but they did not retreat. Admiral Vasquez watched the Dominion fleet advance from the bridge of the Resolute. Her tactical display was a sea of red, hostile icons surrounding a tiny blue cluster of friendly ships. She had faced long odds before, but nothing like this. All ships, she broadcast. This is Admiral Vasquez. Behind us is Earth, our home, our families, everything we fought for. The Dominion has come to destroy it. They will not succeed. She paused, steadying her voice. I won't lie to you. Most of us won't survive this day, but our deaths will not be meaningless. Every moment we hold them here is another moment for our allies to strike. Throughout the Dominion, every ship we destroy is one less ship to threaten our people. Every minute we fight is a minute of hope for every enslaved species watching this battle across the galaxy. She drew her ceremonial sword, a tradition human admirals had adopted from ancient naval customs. For Earth, for humanity, for freedom, all ships engage. The human fleet surged forward. The battle for Earth began with a roar of energy, weapons, and exploding ships. The human fleet threw itself at the Dominion armada with suicidal ferocity, concentrating fire on key targets and making every shot count. The planetary defense grid activated, adding its firepower to the battle. Massive beam weapons hidden in mountains and under oceans struck at Dominion ships. Orbital defense platforms launched missiles in endless streams. The planet itself became a fortress. Admiral Zarin commanded the Dominion assault from the Eternal vengeance, she had expected. Fierce resistance, but the reality exceeded her expectations. The humans were not just defending, they were counterattacking, finding weak points in the Dominion formation and exploiting them ruthlessly. Concentrate fire on their flagship, she ordered. Destroy their command structure. Thousands of Dominion ships targeted the Resolute. Vasquez's shield screamed under the assault, holding far longer than they should have against such overwhelming firepower. Human engineers had spent 3 years improving those shields. Their work was paying off now, but even the best shields have limits. Admiral shields failing, the tactical officer reported. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 18. Maintain fire, Vasquez commanded. Target their forward battleships. The Resolute shuddered as another volley struck home. On the display, Vasquez watched her fleet dying. Around her, ships exploded in silent flashes of light. Hundreds of lives ended with each detonation, but for every human ship that fell, 10 Dominion vessels died. The humans were not just fighting, they were exacting a terrible price. 2 hours into the battle, a human cruiser called the Defiant executed a maneuver that no Vithari commander had ever seen. With its weapons destroyed and its shields gone, the ship accelerated directly at the Eternal Vengeance. The bridge crew understood what their captain intended. None of them flinched. Admiral Zarn saw the ship coming and ordered evasive action. Too late, the Defiant struck the flagship at full speed, punching through the weakened shields and tearing into the hull. The Eternal Vengeance did not die, but it was crippled. Emperor Thavarak was thrown from his feet as the bridge shook. When he rose, alarms were screaming, and his tactical display was filled with damage reports. Get us out of the engagement zone, Zarin commanded. Transfer fleet command to the secondary flagship. For the first time in 12,000 years, a Vithari emperor retreated from battle. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, 400 human ships had been destroyed, but they had taken more than 500,000 Dominion vessels with them. More importantly, they had bought time across the galaxy. Coalition forces struck at undefended Dominion targets. Shipyards burned. Communication stations fell. Supply depots exploded. The Dominion Empire, which had seemed invincible just days ago, suddenly found itself bleeding from 1,000 wounds and on 100 enslaved worlds. Beings who had watched the battle for Earth through intercepted transmissions saw something incredible. They saw 800 human ships hold off 5 million. They saw humans sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They saw the mighty Vithari fleet stopped. Rebellions that had been simmering suddenly exploded into open warfare. Species that had been too afraid to resist now found their courage. The message that Admiral Vasquez had sent years ago finally reached its full impact. The Dominion can be beaten. The humans proved it. Now it's our turn. Emperor Thavarak watched the reports coming in from across his empire and felt his world collapsing around him. The Grand Fleet had failed to destroy Earth quickly. Now it was running out of supplies, unable to maintain the siege. As their logistics network crumbled, he had no choice. He ordered the fleet to withdraw. The retreat of the Grand Fleet was the beginning of the end for the Vithari Dominion. Over the next 3 years, the coalition pressed its advantage. Human fleets, no longer defending Earth, went on the offensive. Allied species that had been fighting for their own freedom joined together in coordinated campaigns. System after system fell. The war was not easy. The Dominion still had millions of ships and fought desperately to preserve its power. Battles were fought across the galaxy. Millions died on both sides, but the momentum had shifted permanently. The Dominion was no longer conquering, it was surviving. Admiral Vasquez led the final campaign. She had promoted thousands of officers, built hundreds of new ships, and forged an alliance of species that spanned half the galaxy. Now she stood at the head of an armada that outnumbered what remained of the Dominion fleet. Set course for Vithar Prime, she ordered. It's time to end this. The siege of the Vari home world lasted 3 years. The Dominion concentrated its remaining forces to defend their capital, knowing that if it fell, everything was lost. The coalition surrounded the system and slowly tightened the noose. It was a war of attrition now. Coalition forces destroyed supply ships trying to reach the home world. Orbital defenses were neutralized one by one. The planet below slowly starved. Admiral Zarin, who had defended the system with everything she had, finally requested a meeting with Admiral Vasquez. They met on a neutral station. Two commanders who had spent 6 years trying to kill each other. Zion looked different than the proud admiral who had first arrived at Earth. She was thinner, older, with haunted eyes that had seen too much death. The Emperor will never surrender, she said. He would rather see our species destroyed than admit defeat. I know, Vasquez replied. That's why I'm talking to you. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted, an end to the war. Freedom for every species the Dominion has enslaved. Vasquez leaned forward. I don't want to destroy the Vethari people. You were conquerors, but so were humans once. We've done terrible things in our history too. The difference is that we learned from them. What are you proposing? Remove the Emperor from power, accept terms for the dissolution of the Dominion, free your subject worlds. In exchange, the Vithari home world and core colonies will be spared. Your people will survive. They'll just have to learn to live as equals with the rest of the galaxy instead of masters. Zarin was silent for a long moment. What Vasquez was offering was unthinkable. The Vithari had ruled for 12,000 years. To give that up, to become just another species among many, went against everything they believed. But the alternative was extinction. I will need to convince the military council, Zarin finally said. The Emperor has loyalists who will fight to the end. Then convince them. You have 1 month. After that we begin our final assault. The Vithari civil war lasted 3 weeks. Admiral Zarin and a coalition of military officers who wanted to save their species moved against Emperor Thavarak and his loyalists. The fighting was brutal but brief. On the 22nd day, Zarin personally arrested the Emperor in his throne room. Thavarak looked at her with disgust. Traitor, he spat. You have destroyed everything our ancestors built. No, Zarin replied. You destroyed it when you attacked a species you didn't understand, when you refused to adapt, when you chose pride over survival. She turned to her guards. Take him too. Holding, the humans will decide what happens to him. 1 month later, Admiral Elena Vasquez walked up the steps of the Imperial Palace on Vir Prime. She was surrounded by an honor guard of human Marines, but she walked without fear. The war was over. Inside the throne room the leaders of 200 species had gathered to witness the formal surrender. Vethari senators and military officers stood alongside Turvok commanders and Kilani diplomats. It was the most diverse gathering in the history of the galaxy. Former Emperor Thavarak stood in chains at the center of the room. He had refused to kneel, and Vasquez had not forced him. Some dignity should be preserved, even for defeated tyrants. Vasquez approached him slowly. The room was silent. Emperor Thavarak, she said, 6 years ago, your dominion attacked Earth without warning. You killed millions of innocent people. You believed we were weak, that we would be easy prey. You were wrong. She gestured at the assembled beings behind her. Today, the Vethari Dominion officially ceases to exist. Its subject worlds are free. Its military is disbanded. Its emperor stands in chains. She stepped closer, looking directly into his four eyes. I could have you executed. Many of the species here would love to see you die. You've caused more suffering than almost any being in history. Thorax sneered. Then do it. I would rather die than live in a galaxy ruled by humans. The galaxy won't be ruled by humans. That's the point you still don't understand. Vasquez turned to address the room. The Vethari Dominion ruled through fear and force. They conquered because they could, and they believed that made them right. We're offering something different, an alliance of free worlds bound not by conquest but by choice. No species above another. No masters, no slaves, just equals working together. She turned back to Thavorak. You'll live out your life in exile. You'll watch as the galaxy you dominated build something better without you. That's a worse punishment than death for someone like you. Guards led the former emperor away. He did not struggle. Ceremony that followed established the Galactic Compact, a new alliance of free worlds that would govern the galaxy through cooperation instead of force. Humanity was offered a leadership position given their role in the war. Vasquez declined. We didn't fight this war to build our own empire, she explained to the assembled delegates. We fought for freedom for everyone. Humanity will be one voice among many. Nothing more. It was a decision that surprised the galaxy. Throughout history, species that won wars had claimed the spoils. The humans asked for nothing except peace and equality. In the years that followed, the Galactic Compact grew and prospered. Species that had been enemies learned to work together. Technology was shared freely. Trade flourished. The scars of the Dominion's rule slowly healed. Humanity returned to Earth and rebuilt. The cities that had been destroyed were reconstructed better than before. Monuments were erected to the billions who had died. The story of the war was taught to every human child so that they would never forget what their species had endured and what they had achieved. Admiral Elena Vasquez retired 5 years. After the war ended, she lived quietly on Earth, refusing offers of political power or celebrity status. When asked by historians about her legacy, she always gave the same answer. We survived, we fought back, we won, but more importantly, we didn't become what we were fighting against. That's what I'm proud of. She died at the age of 92, surrounded by family and friends. Her funeral was attended by representatives of every species in the compact. The woman who had led humanity through its darkest hour was buried with full military honors. Her grave marked with a simple stone that bore her name and a Single phrase, she never surrendered. Across the galaxy, the story of humanity spread. It became legend, then myth, then something deeper, a reminder to every species of what was possible when beings refused to give up. They told of a young species that had barely left its home world when an ancient empire struck without mercy. They told of cities burning and millions dying in the first terrible hours. They told of a people who did not break, who built in secret, who rose from the ashes to challenge their conquerors. They told of battles fought against impossible odds, of sacrifices made without hesitation, of a message broadcast across the stars that had changed everything. Run while you can, humanity is coming. And they told of the end, not conquest but liberation, not revenge but justice, not an empire built on the ashes of the old, but an alliance of equals. Some species wondered if humans were truly that noble. Surely they must have some hidden agenda, some secret desire for power. But as decades passed and humanity continued to live up to its ideals, even the skeptics began to believe the humans were something new, something the galaxy had never seen. Species forged in the crucible of constant struggle, who had learned through millennia of conflict that true strength was not about domination. It was about survival, adaptation, the refusal to give up, no matter the odds. And perhaps most remarkably of all, it was about mercy, the ability to defeat your enemies and then offer them a place at the table. In every corner of the galaxy, beings looked up at the stars and took comfort in a simple truth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever threats might emerge from the void, they were not alone. Humanity was out there. Humanity was watching, and if anything ever threatened the peace they had built, together humanity would fight for it. Because that was what humans did. They survived, they adapted, they protected their own, and they never ever surrendered.